Joining us now is Neil Mackinnon, a global macro strategist at VTB Capital. He was an economist at the UK Treasury during the early 1980s, a period that was marked by industrial action. Neil, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Does this concern you when you hear the TUC and you hear Brendan Barber there talking about concerns over a double-dip recession and also not quite a general strike, let's not go too far, but certainly concerted industrial action?
Well, I think some sort of industrial action is pretty much inevitable. I mean, after all, we're seeing it elsewhere throughout Europe in response to some pretty stiff austerity measures that are being implemented. And for the public sector, it does mean fairly stiff cuts, not just here, but also in the Eurozone area as well. And trades unions are responding to that. We've had general strikes in France, Greece, Spain. And I think that with the public sector cuts that are being envisaged here for the British economy and people throughout the public sector undoubtedly losing their jobs, so high uncertainty about job prospects, then it would be a great surprise if we didn't see an upsurge in industrial action.
And indeed, the unions are quite strongly represented in the public sector workforce. They are doing, obviously, what their members would like them to do, which is protect their members. What can the government do, however, to try and soften this a little bit?
I'm not sure that the government wants to soften anything, and certainly the approach taken by the government so far is to impose fairly heavy public spending cuts.
But are they on a collision course with the unions? Does it have to be that way?
Well, I think they may be on a collision course. And you've got, on the one hand, public sector unions who understandably are looking to protect jobs of their members, and on the other hand, you've got a government, and you could argue it would have made much difference either way, whether it was still a Labour government or a Conservative government, that faces a pretty stiff fiscal challenge in terms of getting the budget deficit back on track. And there's some indications actually, funnily enough, that budget deficit is starting to improve. I mean, I would prefer that the government protected investment. I mean, we've seen a situation, Irish economy, for example, where the nominal economy has contracted 20%, partly as a result of the spending squeezed budget cuts that we've seen implemented in Ireland. And so that's having a drastic effect on Irish GDP growth, on levels of employment. And I just think trying to get this right balance is very, very difficult in terms of getting the budget deficit down, getting debt levels on some sort of sustainable level without damaging the economy, without damaging employment.
If the industrial action does arrive in the scales being talked about today, and you see an awful lot of support for the public sector workers, could that in itself damage the economy and cause a double-dip recession, let alone the cuts themselves, but the response to the cuts?
Well, I think the sort of economic outlook is uncertain anyway, regardless of what happens in terms of industrial activity, strike action. And although the second quarter numbers were reasonably positive, a lot of the fiscal tightening is yet to be fully felt. And I think going forward, and it was interesting looking at the EU's economic growth forecast that were published this morning, that for the third quarter, fourth quarter this year, they're looking for a slowdown in the Eurozone. The UK can't be unaffected because of the fiscal tightening in prospect. I think the only good news is that interest rates are likely to remain low for an extended period, at least we hope so. But certainly we are, I think, entering a difficult phase in the UK economy, in the Eurozone economy, in the US economy, where growth is slowing down, and I think it could be a very difficult situation regardless.
Are you saying that George Osborne should be a little bit more flexible, perhaps, with those cuts in the wake of what could actually be a second slowdown? Well,
it's a very difficult thing for the Chancellor to do, and it'll be interesting to see whether, from a political point of view, if we do get an upsurge in strike action, whether he does become more flexible or he defers spending cuts. I think that's an interesting sort of political debate, and maybe a difficult decision the Chancellor may have to consider going forward. But at the moment, I think we're on a collision course there between governments and trades union.
Okay. Neil Mackinnon from VTB, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Do come back and talk to us again soon.